Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mic'd, the official podcast of St. Michael Catholic Church, Gastonia. I am Shane Page, your host, the Director of Evangelization here, and I am joined by a special guest today, Deacon Bill Melton. Deacon, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, that's nice to be special.
It's nice to be special
Always
every
nice.
once in a while. So it's been about a year now, hasn't it been, since your ordination?
September 25th will mark a year.
Okay, so it's not been quite a year. But I'm curious, if you reflect on the last year since your ordination, because I actually have some questions about the ordination itself.
Mm-hmm.
What has surprised you about being a deacon?
I don't know as much about surprise as just a reminder, maybe. It has to do with people, the needs of people, and how much people hurt or hide, or it's just working with people and their needs, because the needs are great. As we learn in the gospel, the harvest is plenty and the laborers are few, and that's where the deacons find themselves. There's a lot to do.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted you on the podcast, even just for my own edification, there seems to be, or at least from my perspective, some confusion about the role of a deacon versus that of the priest, and the history of the diaconate and everything, and we can get into some of that. But let's talk a little bit about that for our listeners now that see you serving as a deacon. What does that mean? What is a deacon?
Okay, that's a very fair question. Deacons come from the book of Acts, where it talks about the Hellenist widows were not getting their proper amount in the daily distribution. The poor weren't getting, and so the presbyters and the bishops determined that they had a lot to do in this early days of the church in discerning the word and prayer and so forth, and they needed help. And so they decided to pick 7 men and to actually lay hands on them, so that it was an ordination, to assist them at table. We don't see anything in the scripture where they actually exercised that role, but what they did do, they also became proclaimers of the gospel. The first martyr, Stephen, was one of the 7 deacons.
I never put that together, that Stephen, the first martyr, was a deacon.
So the order was in place. Deacons reported it directly to the bishop, as they still do today. We were assigned here to the parish by the bishop.
Okay, so you don't serve St. Michael necessarily. I mean, you don't work under Father Rossi then.
He would be the supervising pastor. He is the pastor and the ordinary of the local church. So we're sent here to help him. So he is the priest and he supervises what we do. But there are other things that we can be required to do outside of that role as well.
So does the bishop have the authority to reappoint you to another parish then?
We serve it. One of the things that we promise is that we will serve the bishop and his successors. Okay. So if the bishop says you go somewhere, you go somewhere. In fact, we were given the option to put down three parishes that we would like to serve at, and they didn't tell us until after the ordination, where we lined up to get our packet with our orders and our assignment. We did not know until after we were ordained where we were going.
Okay, so you weren't necessarily pursuing the diaconate to stay at St. Michael, so it was just up in the air. You just happened to be here because you're appointed by the bishop.
You can hope and you can pray, but the bishop will be the one that sends you where you go.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. So it was not. The diaconate is something the apostles then.
Yes. Yes,
created.
They did. And so to pick back up, so that deacon stayed in that same role until about 1,000 years in, and then it became more of the deacon became a transitional role. So what you hear in Vatican II, the deacons were brought back as an order of its. How do I explain this? That was not a transitional role. So you'll hear the term transitional deacon, and you'll hear the term permanent deacon. So transitional deacons are those men who are in formation for the presbyterate. They're going to be priests.
Okay.
So about, I think it's 3 years in, they will be ordained a deacon with about a year left to go. Now, to become a deacon, you have to first be instituted, first as a candidate for ordination. So that happens with the bishop. And then at a certain point, you are instituted a lector or reader. And then it has to be 6 months prior to ordination, you are instituted as an acolyte. Prior to Vatican II, those were all actually ordinations in the process of being a deacon. So in the early church, deacons did a lot of things. Deacons, after shipwrecks, combed the shoreline looking for victims or to bury the dead. They buried the dead, took care of the bodies, buried the dead. They served as sort of bouncers in the mass. If people were out of line, they served a lot of different unique roles. But so in Vatican II, when the permanent deacon came back, the permanent diaconate, so we operate, being a permanent deacon, we are ordained. We are configured to Christ. If you could pull our soul out and look, you could see, that we had the imprints of the ordination. So we are ordained. And in the Catholic Church, there's 3 orders and the sacrament of holy orders. The first is deacon. So every priest is a deacon, and every priest will tell you they are a deacon. They still have that role. It doesn't go away. So
Father Rossi's a deacon.
He's a deacon. And
Bishop Jugas is a deacon.
Jugas was ordained into the presbyterate, and he is ordained a bishop, and those are the three orders. And so the deacon serves as the icon of the servant, Jesus Christ. So we are the servant hands of Christ. We're the ones that are supposed to be getting our hands dirty. We're supposed to be the ones visiting the sick, visiting the shut-ins, visiting the people in prison. That's another role of what deacons have always done. The priest is the priestly icon of Christ, and the deacon is the kingly icon of Christ.
How so?
You
mean the bishop is the kingly?
Yes, he's the kingly.
Okay, I thought you said the deacon was the...
No. The deacon is servant. The priest is priestly, and the bishop is kingly.
Okay.
So those are the three parts of the order of ordination.
Well, then, what drew you to the diaconate? I mean, and for those of us of our listeners who might be contemplating this, I mean, what was going through your mind to think to yourself, I think I want to be a deacon? I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah. I didn't have the full knowledge of what a deacon was when I felt called to the diaconate. So as you know, I'm a convert, and so I converted in.
You were a Methodist pastor.
I was a licensed Methodist pastor. I served two Methodist churches in Union County. My junior and senior year at Belmont Abbey College, where I majored in history. I felt after that I really was more called into law enforcement. I spent a career as a police officer. But through that time, I felt like maybe there was a call to the diaconate. So one of the prerequisites, my class was the last one to have it, is that we had to go through 2 years, a 2-year course in the diocese called lay ministry. And that was about 14 Saturdays a month, 14 Saturdays a year for 2 years. And it was you're learning basic tenets of, they wanted, I guess, everybody to kind of be on the same page. And at the end of that, if you are interested in becoming a deacon, you send a letter to the bishop telling him that you're interested and you think you may be having that calling. They were doing things a little bit different then. The process was where they brought everybody together, and there was about 70 of us. They brought together and explained the process. And so it was then that I started learning some things about the process. The lay ministry, I started lay ministry twice and had to drop out because family. I had 2 small children. So I applied 2 or 3 more times. It was kind of a joke for the diocese director of it that he finally got me when I came, and my wife went with me too, when she is also a convert. And so But I had no idea that I thought you just put in for it and they sent you the formation and that. Oh no! Oh no! The background process, the packet they sent those who were interested after the meeting was reminded me of the process that we used to hire police officers. It was detailed, and my wife had to fill out an application too, because wives, if we are married, then our first vocation is to our wife. We made that promise first. So if our wives are not on board, we're not on board. And the other thing is the wives are also expected to be part of formation. So they also come to, the first year is called aspirancy. And that, I tell people, if you've been to the eye doctor, when that eye doctor zooms into your eye, that is pretty much the feeling of aspirancy, because they're discerning whether or not you have a call. For me, I thought I had a call. I could speak publicly, so I thought maybe I could preach. But I found a lot of things during aspirancy that a deacon does that a pious layman can do as well. Reading, lecturing, except for reading the gospel, visiting sick, taking communion to the shut-ins. All of those things, you don't have to be ordained to do that.
Then why become a deacon then? I guess that's the heart of my question.
Well, so again, it is that closeness to Christ. It is one of the things the deacon does, is serves at the altar and in the closeness with Christ. So it is, and the difference too. I remember going through aspirancy with my spiritual advisor, who had taught me in college, Benedictine, Father Christopher Kirchgassner, and we were talking about the role of a deacon, and I went through. I can preach, I can read, I can do anything. So those are functions. That's not why. And so deacons are men of prayer first and foremost, and then everything falls through from that.
Okay.
That would be my understanding of it. The other thing that we talked about was that you're always a deacon. You're always a deacon. I in this diocese we wear clerical attire. I can take this clerical attire off and I'm still a deacon. Mm-hmm. I'm a volunteer fireman. If I'm at a house fire, I'm a deacon. I work part-time for emergency management in Gaston County. If I'm doing a media brief, I'm still a deacon. And when that was explained to me, I said, well, that's really cool, because having been a police officer, I was a police officer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and wherever I was at, even out of jurisdiction, I always acted, thought, and behaved as a police officer, because that's what I was. But then it hit me after saying, yeah, I'm on board with that. I'm good with that. I do that now. Wait a minute. When I was having this conversation, I'd been retired a year. So I'd already taken that badge off and put it away forever. I will never pin that back on. As a volunteer fireman, there is a time when I will, unless I die while I'm, there'll be a time if I get old enough, I will no longer be a fireman. But there's never a point where I'm not going to be a deacon.
Even in eternity.
Yes. And unless I'm laicized, for that is the only. I will always be a deacon, and I think that mark will also be there, even if you're laicized.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the formation process. Did you have to take preaching classes?
So the first year in aspirancy, they're looking to see if you're called, and they're making you look inside. They're making you. You're starting to establish your prayer life. We have to pray the prayer office. We have to pray the morning office and the evening office.
The liturgy of the hours.
Right. And so I've learned one of the things my next spiritual director, Father Matthew Bittner, taught me is, when you go into a penitential season like Lent, he had me provide a written plan of penance. And so there were a lot of things in there. So at the end of that, I kept some of those. So that got me on track. So this past year, one of the things that I decided to do for Lent was to pray all of the hours of the office. And so I tend to find that I feel better physically and mentally at the end of the day if I catch those hours when I'm supposed to.
Now, a priest then would be required to pray all 5 of the offices.
Yes.
But you're required to pray 2. And the specific ones are morning prayer and evening prayer?
Right.
Okay.
But so I found, though, that when I started that, I was able to retain it. So maybe at the end of the day, I may miss one of the others, but it makes sure that I always get both. Because one of the things that I was taught in formation, and I see it to be very true, that when somebody who is a priest or deacon, or even bishop, if they go, something happens and they go astray, typically the first thing you find is the prayer life stopped.
Right.
So I'm want to get that established, very well. So.
So they start with prayer, formed you in prayer, and what are some other things that you?
So after aspirancy, the formation was 3 years. We follow in the Diocese of Charlotte the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops directives on formation of deacons, and it's 1 year aspirancy and 3 years of formation. And so during formation, you get various classes on canon law, on preaching. That was a big one. That we did, and when you're giving it, all of your fellow candidates are taking notes on these specific things, and then at the end they give it back to you. And so the other thing that they had us do was we would give like a funeral or a wedding or a baptism in that mix, so that as they said, when we come out and we get called to do a funeral, we've already got something right there. But that's sort of the formation. That's the now. I'm not sure what it's going to be. This next class starts in August, I'm told, and they're doing things a little bit differently than we did. But in aspirancy, during aspirancy, we had psychological evaluations. They met with us individually every session. They have they call it a scrutiny team. And they ask you questions and see your response, and then after it's over with, they all meet and go over, while we were having a presentation in aspirancy on something, we're sitting at a table much like this with another deacon candidate couple, and then there are different deacons and deacons' wives sitting around, and they're assigned to take note of your responses to see if you are called the diaconate.
Now, your wife was a part of the formation, you just said.
Yes.
Does she have to take these assessments and evaluations? What was her role?
So she had to do a writing prompt in the application process and fill out an application. She also had to be part of everything that we did in aspirancy. And COVID, we ended up, for a great part of our formation, doing it virtually through Zoom. Which before, you got the formation directors behind you, and if you got kind of sleepy, they didn't see you. But in Zoom, they're right there. That's pretty cool. But they were part of coming when we were doing it in person, because the notion is this is formation. It's not training, and it's not classroom. I mean, we did online courses through Notre Dame. In the various topics that deacons are supposed to have in formation, but this is not a class where at the end you get the certificate or the degree. This is something that's forming and changing your life. So if your wife's not part of what you're doing, at the end of the trail, you may be here and she's still back here, and you don't know each other anymore. And so this is part of that whole thing. Now, the big thing is the wife can actually throw the yellow flag at any point. She can send an email. She can call him on the phone and say, he doesn't need to be doing this. I don't want him to do this. Whatever. Until the minute, as they said, the minute the bishop lays his hands on you and ordains you, she can call it.
So, just as a hypothetical, are you saying that at the ordination mass, if she could have intercepted the ordination in that moment and prevented it from happening?
She could have sent an email on day one, and all they're going to tell me is, you don't have a call. They're not going to say you don't have a call because your wife said you don't. They're not going to do that, and so because that's generally the thing that they're looking for.
And that's because of that your primary vocation would be a husband and father. There was a deacon who was a sponsor of mine, and I may have the facts wrong, but I think when he was pursuing the diaconate that pressed pause for him because of his family situation at the time. It has nothing against him or character or anything. It was just that his responsibilities as a father and a husband just had to delay the process.
The first thing that Deacon Scott Gilfillan, who was our formation director when we started, one of the first things he said when we gathered for that informational meeting at the conference center is that it's all about being at the right place and the right time. So for me before, I might have been, at the right place, but it wasn't the right time because I could not get those other things done because the kids were small. So when the kids were, I have 2 children, by the time that Jacob was already he was in college, and Kathleen was in her senior year when Laurie and I started into or maybe Kathleen was in her 11th grade year when we started into the lay ministry. I was still in formation when she was graduated from Chapel Hill, because I left the formation session and drove to Chapel Hill in a hurricane to see her graduation.
Well, take us back to your ordination itself.
Okay.
You say you're configured to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Well, did you notice a change in yourself when that moment happened?
It's for me, it's a weight of responsibility. Prior to ordination, I can give you my opinion on anything in Christendom, on the Catholic Church or whatever. If I give you my opinion now, I'm talking with the authority of the church. So what I tell you better be right, because it may affect your eternal soul. And conversely, if I'm telling you wrong, it may affect mine. So it comes with a little bit different weight than prior. When I stand up and do stuff for you at Donuts and Dogma, or any of the things that I do, when I stand up at the AMBO and preach, it's an entirely different. When I'm preparing for that, there's an entirely different weight that goes with that. When I'm in the public and the way I act, whether I'm wearing clerics or not, it's a different. What you say, you're talking as the servant icon of Christ.
Have you had any conversations out in the public with strangers because of your clerics and because of that you're a deacon?
So, as I tell people, I wear the clerics because it's the uniform of the church for clergy. What I find is, as a policeman, when I would wear the uniform, I would have people come up. They would be in need. They needed directions. I was on the Human Trafficking Commission, appointed by the state legislature as a policeman for probably 5 years, my last 5 years. And when I would go to Raleigh and I would go into the legislature and I'd drop in to see our representatives and so forth, if I was wearing the uniform, I would get stopped by people in Raleigh asking directions. I don't even know where I'm at. Okay, so people,
just because you're a police officer,
people come to that uniform because of what it represents.
Yes, that's right.
For 5 years of my career, I worked in special investigations, narcotics, undercover stuff. So I didn't dress as a police officer. I was an undercover agent for 2 years and the captain of the unit for 3. So in the diaconate, when I wear the uniform, when I go to a restaurant, it is very unusual not to have somebody come over and tell me something about themselves, want a prayer for something. It's amazing. My birthday this year, the 23rd of April, after the 9 o'clock mass, I was at Webb's Kitchen in Gastonia, it's a big restaurant here, and waiting on my family because they'd been to the Saturday mass, and I'm in my clerics and I'm praying the rosary on a park bench across the street in front of the old Gastonia courthouse. And a lady pulls up, gets out of her car, and she says, "Good morning, Father. Mm-hmm. Do you mind if I come and sit with you?" And I said, "I'm not a priest. I am a deacon, but you're welcome to come and sit." And she spent the next 15 or 20 minutes talking to me about herself and about her. She had been a Catholic, and so I gave what I call my lapsed Catholic speech. And she promised to come to Mass. I don't know if I haven't seen her or not, but she needed to talk to somebody in the faith.
What was your speech?
I talked to them about the fact they need to come back and how the church has changed, and in a lot of years, depending on their age, depends on where I find them in their life, and to try to pull some stuff out of them to help get them to look at coming back. I've had a lady approach me and want to pray because she just had a test for cancer, and then I said, well, we're going to pray now, and so prayed then, gave her a blessing, and then maybe the next week I'd been at church late, picked up my wife, we went to a restaurant near us, and I was still in clerics, and the lady hails me coming out. She's wearing a mask, and she says, I've got it. I'm like, whoa, what do you have? And she comes over and she pulls her mask down, and I said, oh, and she said, I've got cancer. So let's pray again. And so we did there in the restaurant. So what I find it draws people, and it's an evangelization tool in and of itself.
Absolutely is. I remember there was a comment from a Protestant professor about dress and how we dress, and I can't remember exactly what she said because it's been years since I read this, and it was one of those things that actually made me wear a collar when I was a Methodist pastor. Mm-hmm. Of course, some of my Catholic friends were like, "Wow, you shouldn't have done that," but I did. And one of the things she said was that our dress, our attire, tells the story of our lives. Especially the uniform. It tells the story of our vocation. You see that police officer's uniform, you gravitate to it. You see the white robe, the long gown, the doctor, the surgeon. And why would we want to hide that and not wear what really is the story of who we are? And I think that's why it's so important as a source of evangelization. You would have conversations with people you would never have before. Even when I was a Methodist pastor, I would go through a hospital, and I have prayed with families. I was there to see Betty Smith, but I ended up going into the room of someone entirely different because of what I was wearing.
Right.
And it's like, imagine going to prom with a blue jeans and a white T-shirt.
That's a good analogy.
It would change that. We put on the tuxedo or the dress that does something to our psychology.
Right. The other thing with deacons, I heard at one point somebody had said deacons had one foot in the laity and one foot in the clergy, and that's not true. Both deacons' feet are clerical. The deacon is in the clerical state.
He is ordained.
He is ordained, but both of the deacons' feet are in the world. A lot are still working. I was fortunate enough to retire, so this is sort of my full time. This is what I do. Some have children, some and so we're the unique thing about a deacon is that a deacon is one of the few people, in fact, that actually celebrate all 7 sacraments. Because married and holy orders. So they actually can take part in all 7. So when people are one of our things when we're working with people that are preparing for marriage, I've been married 32 years. They're working with people with children with problems at home or whatever. I've got 2 grown children. They're dealing with the stresses of working and dealing with bosses and things like that. I've done that too. So that's one of the things that we're in the world, we're working in the world, we're operating in the world, but we're in the clerical state.
Well, what sacraments can you administer then?
We can, as we use it as we say it in the Catholic Church, we witness marriages. And infant baptisms, and we are ordinary ministers of the Eucharist. All 3 orders of holy orders are ordinary members of the Eucharist.
You were a police officer how many years?
Credited for 30 years. I had 17 months sick time.
I used to actually worry about some of the police officers that I knew because you see so much of the shadow side of society and of life, people, and I would always wonder, like, are police officers more prone to cynicism?
Oh, absolutely.
In the world? So I guess my question is, like, how has all of those years affected your view of the world? And even especially of ministry as a deacon.
One of my favorite icons of Mary is Mary Undoer of Knots. And so 30 years as a police officer, you see you see the hell that can be on earth. And when you're a police officer and a firefighter and an EMT, which is where I kind of firefighting and EMT I started when I was a child, you have seen a lot of stuff. And when you're a police officer, you go in and you raid houses that are $1 million homes. You go in and you raid houses that are shacks. You see child abuse. You see all of these things. It can have a very negative effect on how you look at people. You can look at them with suspicion.
Suspicion, that's right.
You learn. So and the other thing is you tend to look at people, if you're not careful, as good and bad. So this neighborhood is a bad neighborhood. This neighborhood's a good neighborhood. And all these people in this neighborhood are bad and all these people are good. But what you learn over time, if you're observing, that in the worst of neighborhoods, there are good people, and they're trapped in there, and they can't get out, and they would get out if they could, and they're terrified every night they lay their head down on their pillow, and you would be too if you were in that spot, even as the big police officer in that crowd, because you're outnumbered there. And then the good neighborhood where, you got some very bad people in the very good neighborhoods, and that people are all the same. We all have the propensity to do good, and we all have the propensity to do bad. We all have the propensity to give our life for our friend, and we also all got the propensity to kill someone else. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of which choices we make, and sometimes our passions carry us away, or whatever. So the thing you have to learn as a police officer is you have to, information, I had to start unwiring and untying some of those knots. Now, and sometimes, as Father Rossi says, it gives me a very good peripheral vision, because my radar's generally up when I see you.
Well, I was going to ask that question. I mean, don't you just, when someone comes to you in need, that your immediate first thought as a police officer for 30 years, like, well, they're trying to bilk us out of something?
Well, let me put it to you this way. So when you stand there with the guy on the side of the road, when you're a young cop and he's got the sign, and you watch him in 10 minutes while you're checking his record, take in $60, and you're working off duty, putting your life at risk in a Brindle store to get enough for Christmas at $12 an hour in those days in 1989. When you, just this past week, I had got on the interstate there from Belmont Abbey, and there's a guy flagging me down on the on-ramp. And as I pulled up to the on-ramp, I'm in clerics. I'm in my big pickup truck with my fire red light on the dash and all that. I don't know what kind. I've got everything from firearms to medic bags in that truck, so, and fire gear. So I stopped. I was on the phone and I rolled down the window, and the guy appeared to be Middle Eastern, and he tells me he is parlez-vous français. Well, you know me, I don't parlez-vous, no français. And I said no. He said, English. And then he says he's run out of gas and needs some help. God will bless. And then he tries to sell me his rings. That's a scam. You can look it up. So he has stopped me in traffic coming on I-85 trying to scam me out of money. So that's where I have the peripheral vision. I know he's not in need, because that's the second time that's happened to me. The rings are worthless. So you start, people come up and need something, they come to the church or whatever, and the first thing they tell you, they start telling you things that are improbable, things that aren't true. And so you try to help them as best as you can. And that's the hard part of having been a cop. Perhaps if I hadn't been a cop, it would be very easy to just, okay. I had one pull me out.
So by being a deacon, it tempered you. It had to have tempered you in the moment.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, it's so here one day in the parish, right before Mass, before I was ordained, a guy comes in looking for the pastor. And I was in a casket because I was serving that night. And so he tells me this story about being robbed and cut on the head. Well, he had no cut there, but he had this big bandage on the side of his head. So so I hadn't found Father. I had no cash on me. He wanted $20. We gave him $20, and he went away. My wife tells me later, she said, when he came around the church on a bicycle, he didn't have that bandage on. The same week, I'm here at the church. He comes back. He goes to go in the church. I step out and say, hey, can I help you? And he needs money. And I said, well, weren't you just here Saturday? You know what? You got robbed, right? Yeah, they cut me on my head. There's still no cut and no bandage. You know, so you want to help, but you know, one of the things I learned in formation, and it was from some Sisters of Mercy, is that old line from Scripture. We must be as timid as sheep and as cunning as wolves. When we're trying to be stewards and help people, because the other thing is, if you hand a drug addict a handful of money, or somebody that's an alcoholic, and you hand them a handful of money, that's not going to help them. It could kill them. So that's another hard part of being in the diaconate, because we're helping those people, and we're you were ordained for the poor to be a part of your mission, right?
Primary mission.
So how do you? And I'm still learning this, and I'm working with a group here in Gastonia who tries to get to the bottom of to get them the help they need to get them off of needing money, get them employed, get them substance abuse help, get them housing. So it's something that somebody asked Bishop Sheen. Bishop Sheen was known.
Fulton
Sheen. He was known, and I'm a great fan, a follower of his, and he was known back, in a time when a $20 bill was a lot of money, that anybody that came up to him, he would give them a $20 bill. Anybody that came up in need, he would give them a $20 bill. And one time his nephew asked him, how can you do that? And his response was, how can I not? And that's the point, is to make sure that we don't send Christ away, unawares, and that's where it gets hard.
Is being a deacon everything you thought it would be? I mean, almost a year in, is it what you thought it would be?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so, because having been a pastor when I really wasn't prepared for it at all, I learned a lot about people and how people operate and how people function as a police officer. So I've been a pretty good student of people and how people are. So I've learned to kind of to work in that lane, and so I really haven't had any surprises.
What, kind of our last question, you know what your gifts are, what your strengths are, and now that you're ordained and you're appointed here as St. Michael from the bishop, what are you hoping? What are you hoping your gifts will do? What do you want your mission to be? To the same mission as our Blessed Mother, to show people Christ. That's the job of the deacon, is a herald of Christ, and to bring Christ to those who are suffering, to be able to discern who needs and when they don't need. When you can't discern either way, you help. That you always help. That's the big thing, and to be open to whatever comes from the Holy Spirit. The one thing that you learn is we are the servants. So if you notice, if we're doing something, I will go back to the kitchen, because that's where a deacon is supposed to be. If didn't the word diaconus mean butler in the ancient world?
I've heard that it was said that it was
almost like a waiter.
It's a servant, and you can.
Yes.
Yeah, it's The root is in getting your hands dirty and a certain. In fact, deacons a lot of times will say that they're actually waiters, because that's what they were. That's what they came about, as helping at table. So it's the thing that I find that I do a great deal of is work with the bereaved. Mm. If I've learned anything, something that was surprising, is a lot of people that are lapsed Catholics, when they end up terminally ill or very sick, they come back to the church, and it's something I didn't see in the Protestant church, and I'm sure you didn't see it either. And I see it as a great grace that God allows people that have been a part of the church for 50 years or longer, that at the end they make themselves right with Christ, and they prepare themselves for the journey.
It's such a delicate moment too when someone's in grief.
But I see more miracles at end of life than I see in anything else I've done so far. I spend a lot of time with those people who are under hospice care, and seeing what happens in their life. That's where the miracles tend to be.
Well, we know we are blessed to have you here serving as the deacon.
And we're blessed to have you because you bring some things to the table that we don't ordinarily see.
Well, I remember when I first laid eyes on you, I have to say this, when I first met you, I thought to myself, he doesn't strike me as the prototypical Catholic that I have noticed. I was like, and then when I found out you used to be a Methodist, it all began to make sense. We need to pray for our Methodist brothers and sisters. They're going through a lot there. And,
as I say, I'm a Reformed Methodist. You are too.
Yes, I am as well. And it's good to be home.
Yeah, it's. I tell people, come home to Rome. That's very. Just leave all that other drama, and come on to Christ Church.
Well, Deacon Bill Melton, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for listening. If you'd like more information about St. Michael in our parish, please visit our website. If you have a question you would like to have us address on a future podcast, you'll find our email addresses online as well. So on behalf of Father Rossi, I am Shane Page. Deacon Bill, we wish you all well. God bless.